Hello and welcome to the Career Success Podcast. I'm Jason Connolly. If you're a regular listener, it's great to have you back, but if you're new, welcome to the show. Every week we speak to the biggest names in business, but also best-selling authors, TEDx speakers, as well as up-and-coming and emerging business talent. We speak to such a variety of people all across the globe. If you have a passion for business, then this is the podcast for you. In this episode, I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Jenny Campbell. Jenny is an ex-career banker turned business turnaround specialist and cash machine entrepreneur. Jenny is well known for appearing as a dragon on two series of Dragon's Den 2017 to 2019. After leaving school at 16 to begin her working life counting cash in a bank branch, she climbed through the ranks to become one of the few senior female bankers at the time in the UK. Following 30 years in the banking trade, Jenny left the corporate world in 2006 in pursuit of a new challenge: to turn around a failing cash machine business owned by RBS. Jenny launched a major operational restructure of Hanco ATM Systems, turning it from a business that was making a huge loss in competitive markets to a thriving, profitable entity operating across Europe. She later went on to buy out the business from RBS and become the majority shareholder, later relaunching it as YourCash Europe Ltd. The cash machine company quickly expanded to become one of the leading provider of ATMs to the retail market across Europe, handling millions of ATM transactions and processing billions in cash value. 10 years on from taking the business under her wing, Jenny sold YourCash in October 2016 to a company listed on the New York Stock Exchange. Jenny was previously awarded Businesswoman of the Year, and Jenny stays true to her favourite business motto: live by corporate standards, but breathe like an entrepreneur. So Jenny, thank you so much for joining me on this episode.
You're welcome.
It's great to have you here. So before we kind of talk about Hanco and what you did in banking, tell us about the early days for you, because you left school at 16 years old. And tell us about your school days and what your experience was like in school and why you chose to kind of leave at 16 years old.
I mean, the answer to that is in the context of, I suppose, growing up and family. I always say when I'm doing my keynote speeches, you are a product of your childhood, but embrace the good parts, lose the parts you're not so fond of, don't get hung up about it. And so my childhood consisted of, I was middle child between two brothers. It was a very active childhood, outdoors, almost, swallows and Amazons, Secret Seven, Famous Five type thing. I've got lots of photos of me hanging out of trees and being a total tomboy. I always say I never had any Barbie dolls, and I played a lot of adventures outside. So it was very active in terms of growing up with my brothers, who I'm still very close to today. And also, my mum and dad were, I guess, middle-class professionals who sought to give the best for their children, and also encourage their children to achieve, believing that, the harder you work, the more you'll achieve. So, that meant working hard for your exams, doing your homework, playing musical instruments, going to Scouts and Guides, doing your swimming tests and all of that sort of thing. So it was a very active childhood. And then that led on to, so I started work at 13 and in a small newsagent's all day Saturday and half of Sunday. Felt the value of money in my pocket. I could buy my own clothes, feel a little bit independent. And didn't realise at the time that I was learning how to run a business, serving customers, counting money, cashing up at the end of the day. And I really enjoyed that. And I suppose it grew my confidence as well. By the time I got to 16, I was doing my, O-levels, GCSEs. Actually, at that point, I was on a path to go to university. I was at an all-girls private school, day school, and we were all expected to go to university. And part of our curriculum at 16 was to go and do a week's work experience somewhere. And I happened to go and do a week's work in the local bank branch. My father was in banking. It wasn't in his bank branch, but it is in what he was able to organise it for me in another branch. So I went to work there for a week, and in that week, I just had a light bulb moment, like I tend to have had all my life. But I thought, do you know what? I really enjoy this. I enjoy, again, serving customers, being active, potentially earning money going forward. And I just thought, why am I doing an extra 2 years at school when I could come straight to work? And when I had that conversation with my father, he said, we're anticipating that you go on to uni, etc. okay, you can join the bank or apply to join the bank. In those days, there was 700 applications for 70 jobs type thing. So you can apply, but I want you to do your banking exams. So although I left school at 16, I didn't finish my education. I just then took my education into night school. And I did 7 years worth of night school education. And by the time I was 23, I was a qualified banker. So I had the equivalent of a degree, except I'd done 7 years work and I had no student debt, of course. So, I think hard work has always been in my blood.
It's interesting you say about banking, because you sounded really entrepreneurial at the time, and maybe I could imagine, maybe you wanted to go into sales, you'd learn, that art of selling. What was it that kind of work experience in banking that made you go into that? Or what was it about banking that was drawing you in at the time? Because that's not necessarily where I'd always think, oh, that's where someone with a flair for sales might go.
Yeah, I mean, to digress slightly, when I was going through the Businesswoman of the Year competition, one of the judges said to me, I was then 46, and he said, what took you so long to become an entrepreneur? And I said, I've actually reflected on this and thought, I think entrepreneurial spirit was always in my blood, because my grandparents, both my mum and dad's parents, were builders, printers, worked locally and had their own businesses. And that was 100 years ago. But then what they wanted for their children was less risk and more security and, pension schemes, etc. So both my parents went into professions, one in banking, one teaching. So, but I think that was always in my blood, that my grandparents had their own businesses, and that's how they got going, if you like. And then my parents became professionals. So that was always sitting there. And I think being in banking, at the end of the day, I was all the way through, every one of my roles was supporting a customer, certainly on the business and commercial side, that were themselves in business. So later on in the 90s, when I was a business relationship manager, I was walking into businesses, just like the one I eventually bought, actually. And I was walking in as the bank manager, to shops or to manufacturing businesses or to farming or building businesses. And I was sitting down with those proprietors and saying, well, how did you get started and how can the bank help you? And let's look at your cash flow and your profit and loss and so on. So, and eventually the tables were turned when I was on the other side of that table. Yeah. So I think I was never very far from entrepreneurialism, actually.
Well, I guess you was getting that first-hand experience. Do you think, because I've got a relationship manager with my bank, I won't mention the bank, but do you think that their kind of role has changed over the years? Do you think that, it sounds to me like the role of a relationship banker then was a lot more hands-on than I maybe think it is now? Do you think the banking sector's changed a lot in that time?
It has a lot, and sadly, in my view, I was doing that relationship banking in the 90s, and then it all became very centralized, and the people who were going out to see the clients then were really, as I called them, ticking boxes and saying, my credit function will let me know in due course. When I was a relationship manager, I had discretion to lend up to certain amounts of money, to agree the interest rates, to agree the fees. But it seemed that it all became, tick box stuff, and people became de-skilled. And, actually all the technical qualifications I had gained in the 80s were no longer required at street level, because you were effectively, as they call them, customer service officers, as if you were in a retail outlet. That's not what I call real banking. And I do feel that has been lost somewhere along the way, but that, some of the more forward-looking banks are now trying to build that back. But you don't build it back overnight because of the expertise you've lost.
Well, I guess the clue is in the title, relationship manager, and that's what you was harnessing and building back then. Do you think if you had your time again now, you'd still end up back in the banking sector? Is that an impossible question to ask?
I think, I would still go into banking or into a profession to give me a good grounding for becoming an entrepreneur. I say in my keynote speeches to people, I am delighted that entrepreneurialism is alive and kicking now in the UK, certainly since the last recession in 2008. We've got young people who want to be entrepreneurs. My fear is that too many young people see that as a route to managing their own diary and becoming a millionaire by the time they're 30. And it does, as well as I do, it doesn't work out like that. It's quite a lonely place. You need a lot of experience behind you to be really successful. And I've always said that my banking career absolutely gave me more experience and disciplines around so many facets of running a business that I could have never sort of done a degree for, really. And, you know, and another example of that is my eldest son did his accountancy qualifications with one of the top 4 accountancy firms, and then left and went to set up his own restaurant business. But he couldn't have done what he did and wouldn't be as successful as he is, I don't believe, if he hadn't have done his accountancy degree in the first place. So I say to young people, go to work first of all, get some money behind you, watch and learn how businesses run, get your confidence levels up, and then become an entrepreneur. Maybe start that business on the sidelines in the evenings or at the weekends and so on. But I don't think it's a bad thing to go and get a job first of all and learn from how those businesses have become successful in their own right.
I think that's such great advice. I always think to myself, you know, I had a hard time in the police for a multitude of reasons, but I always think it's those skill set that I got in the police of being able to communicate with people is probably a massive part of where I am now.
Ready for what you do now, probably, if you hadn't have come through the journey you've been on.
Exactly. So tell us about, because you became one of the first female senior bankers in the UK. Tell us about that kind of feeling at the time, what the banking sector was like. Tell us about, you know, your kind of transition to the top of becoming a business leader in the bank. And then we'll go on to talk about Hanco and what you did there.
I mean, you know, I look back and I tell these stories, and you know, some of them will make you cringe. But it was tough in the late 80s and into the 90s, being a woman in banking, having children as well, and trying to climb the career ladder. You know, when I was 26 and just before my first child, I received a letter from the HR department of the bank at the time, and it said to me, "Dear Jenny, we've assessed your future career prospects as a grade B." And I thought, well, no one's asked me what I think of my future career prospects or what my ambitions are at all. And then I looked across the desk at my male colleague who was doing exactly the same job as me for another manager, support manager. And I said, you know, "Tim, what grade have you got?" Well, you know what the answer is. Tim had a grade A. And that sort of thing, you know, it made me grit my teeth and think, I'm not going to stand for this. And this is where I started to challenge up the line where things didn't feel fair. And indeed, I did challenge it, and 18 months later I had my grade A. And that was important because what the bank was trying to do good in those times of promoting or supporting women through juggling, you know, a career path, but in doing so needed to reshape things a bit differently, because an A grade meant they guaranteed me my job back after I'd had a baby at the same grade in the same place, sort of thing. Whereas a B grade said, "We'll try and give you your job back." Well, that doesn't really give you as much confidence in it, does it? So
that's going to be anxiety
so
provoking when you're off.
You know, battling against a few things then, and then, you know, another 10 years later, I'd found my way into London, because I worked out that if you really wanted to climb the career ladder, you needed to be in London. Now, that was probably the toughest time when I was mid-30s, 2 children under 10, commuting into London and, you know, trying to do a good job there. But the city was full of what I call presenteeism. You know, if you weren't at your desk at, you know, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock at night, you weren't seen to be committed. Whereas I had to leave at 5:30 to go and, you know, deal with childcare duties. But I had work in my bag and I brought it back the next day. But you'd still get those frowns from people. "Oh, you're leaving now, are you? The real work starts now," would be the comments. And yet they were from people who've been standing at the coffee machine, you know, numerous times throughout the day, you know, so they needed to get their head down at 5:30. So it was very, very difficult in the late 90s, but things changed significantly, I would say, in the early 2000s when Royal Bank of Scotland took over NatWest, and they had a very different ethos altogether. They were much more pro-equality and diversity, and they rewarded you, you know, based on what you delivered. And that worked out very well for me in those years leading up to me then going to Hanco.
It must have taken real strength as well to stand up and say, "Hey, this isn't right. I'm not happy with this," and to challenge that at the time as well, and to stick your head above the parapet.
It did, but, you know, I'm not backward in coming forward. I say, actually, you know, in the early 2000s, when I did challenge some of those things within the corporates, it didn't go down very well in London at all. And why? 1, I was female, 2, I was northern, and 3, I said it how it was. And, you know, I was usually talking to, you know, a lot of plummy-mouthed men, if I may say. So it didn't go down very well at that time. And I was I was getting to the point where I was thinking I have to go back to grassroots banking where I'm serving customers, not puddling around in this head office where it's all, rather false. But then, sometimes you need a bit of opportunity and luck to come your way. And for me, that was RBS taking over NatWest, where they cleared out that whole stuffy, blocking layer and gave me the chance to thrive. And, I thrived under that new ownership then.
You must be proud of what you've done for diversity, inclusion and representation within the banking sector then, because, things have come on a long way, just in those periods of years since you've been in there.
I always try to stand up for what is right. And, I once heard a speech by Sir John Harvey Jones, and he said, women, I'll give you 3 challenges. Stand up for things that are not right and challenge them. The second thing is go out and vote. I don't care what your politics are, but go and vote. A certain lady lost her life for you. And the third thing is get in amongst the young females in this country, aged 10, 11, 12, and convince them that they can become engineers, they can build roads and houses, they don't have to follow traditional routes. And, one day I was at a school where a young Asian girl ran up to me, and I was doing an event on behalf of Young Enterprise charity. And she said to me, I was so thrilled, she said, until Young Enterprise came along, she said, my parents told me that I was going to be a lawyer or I was going to be a doctor. And she said, thanks to Young Enterprise and people like you being here, I know I'm going to be a businesswoman. And I think that's great. Nice.
So in 2006, you left the corporate world in pursuit of this challenge to turn around the failing cash machine business that was owned by RBS.
Yeah.
Talk to us a bit about that and how that all kind of came about and how you transitioned that business.
Yeah, well, sometimes things come about a little bit by accident and a little bit, by making your own luck as well. But I decided I didn't actually leave RBS at that stage, but they had bought this business, and
right.
I was ready for my next role within the banking corporate, and I saw a role advertised that I could drive to instead of getting the train into London. We'd had the 7/7 bombings, which I found very, very unsettling. And I thought, this is a little small and medium enterprise business that the bank owns that I can drive to, that has 150 staff, that I can make a difference in. So instead of being a small fish in a big corporate, I can be a bigger fish. I was going in as number 2 at that time in a business that I could touch it end to end, from the products that they sold to the marketing piece, the finance piece, the sales and operations piece. So you can put your arms around an end-to-end business and make a difference. So I went there, applied for the job, and I was successful. And I went there on what I thought was a 2-year job, frankly, and then back to the ivory tower in London. But along came 2008 recession, and the bank no longer wanted this little business. It wasn't core anymore. They had bigger things to focus on. So they asked me to sell it for them. Again, I've never sold a business before. And one of the lessons I say to people is realize what your strengths are, and more importantly, realize what your weaknesses are your gaps, and put people around you who fill those gaps for you. So don't try and be all things to all people. So, I recruited a good accountant and a good lawyer, and we started to try and market the business. And we had some interested purchasers come along, but throughout that process, it began to dawn on me that I'd been proud to call myself a banker all my life, and that was 30 years through NatWest and RBS. But by 2008, I was no longer proud to call myself a banker. For those of us who've lived through those times know why. Definitely wasn't proud to call myself an RBS banker anymore. And I loved this business I was working in, that I'd worked in for 2 years. I'd done a significant turnaround program in that business, not to grow it, but actually to shrink it to make money instead of losing money. So the business I went into was turning 40 million a year, but losing 7. Whereas 2 years on, through my turnaround program, its turnover was 30 million a year, but it was making 7, or it was heading up to making 7. So I thought, we've got a great little business here, and if we sell this business now, it'll just get folded into a competitor. And I was looking out of, my office thinking, all these people here who I've got a personal relationship, with over 100 people in this building, they'll all lose their jobs, their families, their mortgages, and there's no need for that. This is a great little business. So there was a light bulb moment that thought, well, maybe the management team can buy this business, but also a terrifying moment because I've, as I say, been a banker 30 years and I had my father whispering in my ear, what about your pension?
And you must have been overwhelming as well to suddenly got it set in your mind that I'm going to sell this business, to then have that moment of, oh,
I'm going to buy this business.
Yeah.
Yeah. And equally, I've always been used to on the 18th of every month, I got paid and I never needed to worry about that, unless I got something seriously wrong. Whereas going forward, what that means, if you buy the business, one, you need to raise some money to put into it. Nobody's going to lend you 100% of the money like they wouldn't do to buy 100% of a house. So I needed to raise some money at a time when all my investments in NatWest and RBS over the last 30 years were frankly worth a tenth of what they had been. So my nest egg was not worth a lot. I needed to raise some money and I knew I wasn't going to get paid on the 18th of every month. I had to think about paying a significant amount of money to 100 people who were looking at me on the 18th of the month. So a massive step into the unknown. But you do it because you believe in what you're going to do. You absolutely have to believe it, and and have a stick of steel through you, I think, as well.
Yeah. What an amazing story. And obviously that business, you turned that around and it became one of the leading provider of ATMs across Europe, processing billions in cash value. What do you think was key as sort of in regards to the turnaround? Was it that kind of core belief that you had that this was a great business and that's what kind of carried you through that time? Or was there other kind of contributing factors to its success as well? Well, assuming there's quite a few, but...
Yeah. I think I'd been so used to over the years looking at so many different businesses through banking that I just looked at this business through that lens and said, okay, what is this? It's the product is a cash machine that dispenses cash to customers, and we get paid for dispensing that cash essentially from the banks, for providing that service. So, and at the time, 2008, different today, of course, cash was still a very dominant payment method, at least 65% or something of all transactions it would have been in 2008. And even 10 years later, it was still about 50% of all transactions. So, you've got a product and a service there that is needed. So then you look at the business and say, but what is going wrong here? Why are we not making money here? So you go through the whole value chain, if you like, of what are you selling it for and where are you making the money and where are you spending and where's your margin? And you just have to tighten everything up. And essentially the business had grown so fast since before RBS bought it that it didn't have any proper, and I'm going to use sort of management words here, but it's what you get taught. It didn't have the systems or the processes or the quality of people to deal with a multi-million-pound business. It had started with one cash machine, one person, and so on. And so essentially it was trying to run a multi-million-pound business on flawed technology and spreadsheets and people that were not good enough quality either. So I just started, working through that systemically, and I'm a good one for dividing things into projects, as I call it, slice the elephant and start at the top of the most prioritized items and work down. I think when I had to write that up for the first investor as to what we'd done, I realised that over 2-3 years, we delivered about 20 end-to-end projects to right-size the business.
Right, okay.
So it's about the discipline of just digging deep and putting the fires out wherever we had them, and then every little crank of the handle that you do, you see it turning back to profit.
How do you tend to deal with your challenges? Have you got kind of a systematic way that you tackle problems, or?
Yeah, I think so. I think I've got a fairly structured mind, I would say. Not that that's always the right thing. Again, talking about filling gaps, it's good to have creatives around you as well to, push more options or different ideas. But I get hold of a problem and I suppose put it into a box by defining what is the problem, what do we need to do, how do we need to do it, when are we going to do it, what results do we need to see, and just then monitoring it all the way through.
Sounds very systematic.
Yeah, I think it is. It's the only way to be when your ship is sinking and it's got holes in it.
I think what you've really touched on is it all comes down to experience a lot of the time, and it's kind of that experience that you've got throughout the years that has been absolutely pivotal to what led you to that moment, that led you through those challenges of that time. What does success mean or look like to you? How do you kind of define success? It's quite personal to each person, I tend to find.
general level, success is doing the right things, achieving the right results, ensuring customers get a great product, great service, accepting that you're always going to get some complaints or negative feedback or whatever, but deal with those. You can, you'll always get that, but see that as, valuable, and turn that complaint or feedback into a positive. And, for me, enjoying every day is the most important thing. If you don't enjoy what you're doing, then stop doing it and do something else. And I used to say that to my people as well. First of all, surround yourself by great people, people you want. You're at work a long time. So get people in your team who you want to work with, and work out as hard as you, but like to have as much fun as you do as well. And if that's not working for either of you, then be honest and have that conversation. And you'll often find that they'll be honest as well and say, no, it's not working for me either. And then just treat those people fairly and help them to find other opportunities that are more suitable to them.
I absolutely so agree. I think surrounding yourself with positive and great people is absolutely key in business. What would you say are the main lessons that you've learned along the way in business? Has there kind of been any fundamental lessons that you've had to learn the hard way, or lessons that you'd want to pass on to other people?
I could come up with a menu of them. I'd say things like never be forced into a decision that you're not ready to make. I was always told that if you don't know what the right decision is, sleep on it, or sleep on it once or twice. But if somebody's pushing you for a decision, say to them very clearly, if you want the right decision, you wait. If you want the wrong decision, the answer is just no. So don't let people push you. Take your time. Secondly, we've already covered it. Surround yourself by great people. Recognize what you need around you to make a balanced team. And I don't just mean the people working alongside you every day. I also mean your advisory support. So make sure you've got the right accountants and the right lawyers and the right employment lawyers as well. So dealing with all those things that make your business, sound. So the right support structure around you. Treat your employees well and fairly. I have a sort of a tough love approach. We really looked after our employees in terms of parental support or bereavement support and that sort of thing. Equally, I looked for that coming back when we had issues to deal with as well. So you want that right DNA in the business. I used to say to the team when we hire people, I want them to have a certain sparkle like we do, so we rock and roll when we're at work, and we're happy when we go home and have our dinner with our families. So, it's about having those core values of, trust and loyalty and respect for each other as well. So I think it goes quite deep into it, in my view, as to how great businesses work. I think it goes quite deep and quite emotional, really.
Really interesting. And we couldn't have you on this show without asking about Dragon's Den, because that's where we've all begun to love you from, and as we got to know you on that show. So tell us about Dragon's Den. Did you enjoy your time on the show?
I enjoyed the 2 series I did. I saw that opportunity didn't come to me. People say, oh, how did Dragon's Den find you, sort of thing. And I said, no, it doesn't work like that in my world. I usually find my own opportunities. So I saw it. I opened the paper one day and saw that 2 dragons were stepping down. And I've watched Dragon's Den since it started in 2004. And I looked up and I said to my marketing manager at the time, I said, well, that'll be my seat, won't it? And she said, oh, I'll get onto them now. And I said, no. And then I quickly sort of tried to rewind and said, I was only joking. She said, no, you weren't. And you will be really good at it. So she spoke to them. And actually, we were a bit behind the drag curve because they already had lined up their screen tests for other people. So I then had to do a bit of persuasion with the people I was talking to say, oh, please let me come and present myself, and then you can decide, give me a chance. So I went for the screen test, and I'm told I was up against 7 others for 2 seats. So I always like to ask those questions to know what the competition is. And then I got my seat, and I did enjoy it. I wanted to do it because I felt I loved the program. I've always seen it as a big business education program to inspire others, a bit like we're talking like now. And I used to give people a lot of advice, in the pub or at home or whatever. So I thought I respect this program, and it's just the same thing, sitting in a seat, talking to the entrepreneurs and getting a chance to come alongside them and help them to be even better than they might have been. And that's essentially what it is. I was never too worried about the cameras on me. I used to get asked, how do you feel when the cameras are on you? And I said, I don't really notice them. I just focus on those entrepreneurs and, give them their chance to pitch and decide whether I'd like to be part of that or not. You have to learn some new skills about how to negotiate with the entrepreneurs, how to play some tactics with your fellow dragons. We're actually great chums off set, but on set you've got to be dragon-like, and if you're too chummy and too laid back, the producers will tell you to be more dragon-like. So it is a show at the end of the day. It is a show. And they, are looking for facial expressions and verbal expressions, etc., to make that show. So you get perceived as a certain character, and we all do it, don't we? When we see people on TV, we all have an opinion of what people are like, but you don't really know that person. But you get, you form a view based upon what is portrayed to you over the screen, which has been sliced and diced several different ways to make a show. First of all.
Really interesting. It's really, and it's good on you for going out there and getting the opportunity. What a lovely story. I guess, what is your top tip for seeking investments?
I say this to entrepreneurs that I support through the work I do with the Princess Trust now. You've got to make yourself investable, both as a person and in the product or service that you offer. So again, when those entrepreneurs walk into the den, the first thing you're doing is, we are judgmental as human beings. We try to tell each other not to do first impressions, but you do. We all do it as soon as somebody walks through the door. So, you have to form that good first impression. And then you have to be credible as well. Because I'm sitting there thinking, I might like what you're selling, but I'm not sure if I want to work with you. I'm not sure you're my type of person. I'm not sure if you feel credible enough. I'm not sure you could cope with tough times. So first and foremost, you've got to be confident in what you're presenting and be able to explain it really easily in a couple of minutes of what it is you actually do. I have people come up to me, in the Princess Trust and other places where they, start to explain to me what they're doing. And after a few minutes, I'm thinking, I've still no idea what they're talking about. So get your pitch right as to what it is you're doing and why I would want to be interested in this. And then, for investment purposes, an investor is looking for something they can invest in and make a return on. So it has to be an investment that is going to scale up and be national or international and have an exit route. Investors are not there to be your banker and give you a cheap loan. No, and that's why many a time we'll say to people, maybe it will be true of you, Jason, that you've got a lifestyle business, not an investable business. And it's a lifestyle you love, and you'll still be doing this in 10, 20 years, but it's not a business to invest in, because that investor wants a return in 3 to 5 years. So how do they get their money back?
And there seems to be a lot of people who come onto the show who have this kind of lifestyle enterprise. Yes. And you sort of see them get torn apart as soon as they walk in the den. On a closing note, I've absolutely loved our time of talking with one another, and I could talk to you for hours. But on a closing note, someone's maybe thought, right, now is the right time to start a business. I feel I've got the life experience. I've built up a repertoire. What would be the kind of Jenny Campbell top tip that you'd give to someone thinking about starting their own enterprise and they feel they're at the right time and place?
Good on them. Just make sure that you are physically, mentally strong enough for this. It can be a lonely place, but start small and, make sure you've got a product that people want and that you can make money out of and that you can scale up to be a bigger business. Now, you never want to be a busy fool. There's no point selling 100 products but making nothing out of it. You'd be better selling 20 products and making, some money out of it. So make sure the product there's a gap in the market where you can make money and you can feel really passionate about what you're doing.
And what lovely advice to end the show on. Jenny, it's been an absolute honour to have you on this show. Thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome, Jason.
That was Jenny Campbell. I'm Jason Connolly. This is the Career Success Podcast. Until next time, goodbye.